Professor Pete here. Welcome to the animation class. And this week we are going to talk about sound. Why do we put sound into our short films? What kind of sounds are there to put in short films? How to edit sounds. So let's just jump right to it. First off, the types of sounds. There's music with violins, pianos. It's a sound track, for example. The other one is soundscapes, where it could be in a jungle. We hear birds chirping, things ruffling in the trees. The other one is sound effects, where we hear a knock on a door, a horn blasting, something that could aid in the storytelling process. A couple of good places to get sound effects is Bensound. So here I am on the website. The other one is even YouTube. You can go into YouTube and then use some links to download the sound file, or there's direct links from YouTube. The last one that I also like is SoundSnap. That one is a paid subscription, but also very good. Once we've acquired some sounds, this is what it looks like. It deals with peaks and troughs. This is a visual representation because we don't have the opportunity to see sound. Like if we talk to somebody, we don't see the sound. That would be really cool. But it is these compressions and decompressions of sound which allows us to hear. In terms of editing, this is Adobe Audition, and I've just loaded a few different sound effects into the program. So I just clicked and dragged it into the file section. And you can hear some sound effects. So here, if I hit space bar, you hear the snarl. And again, it's measured over time on the top here. And over on the vertical, this is the volume. If it's closer to this line, it's going to be lower volume, like this section. If it's going to be louder, it's going to be this section. So it's also left and right channel. This being the left channel, this being the right channel. More or less, they're similar, if not pretty similar. The other things that we can look at in terms of the software here is to edit the volume. Now, volume is probably the most common one. So I could just select this and then increase it by decibels. So 6 is to double the sound volume, and 3 is to half increase the sound volume in either direction. So you can go +3 or -3. If you go too much like this, it'll blast and make some really bad distortion. So don't go over the threshold here in terms of the decibels. So you can see the decibels on the right hand side, where pure silence is right here, and then you have positive almost up to 0 here, and that would blast the speakers. So don't increase it too much. A couple of other things that are pretty useful is to actually edit this. So here's an example of some sound effects I grabbed from YouTube. I'm going to hit spacebar and hit play. So for example, maybe you just want this section. You can hit Control C, Control Shift N, makes a new audio file, give it a name. The settings are fine. And then Control V, paste it in, and now you've got that sound effect. You may not want the silence in the beginning, so you can just select it, hit delete, and then click and drag here as well, select that, and then hit delete on the keyboard. So that's how you can cut your audio tracks. Now here we have a soundtrack, and if I just play a few seconds of it, for some reason you may want to not only edit this, but also increase, decrease the volume, which you already know, but also maybe fade in or fade out. You go under favorites here, and you can see that there's a number of options, but you'll be able to find that there is the fade in and fade out option. We can have a look at some other effects. So under delay and echo, we can apply, as it sounds, a delay or an echo to it. So we can make the room sound like it's a cave or a bounce. So there's that one example under delay. There's also echo. Came to Canada as refugees from Laos, so they knew nothing how they're being called, so they might not taste. So kind of creepy, but also pretty fun. There's reverb as well, so we can go and make it sound like, you know, it's coming from a bigger room. And so that's under reverb. So again, different rooms have different sounds. So we go to a movie theater, the walls are usually padded, the seats are really padded, so it absorbs a lot of the sound. It doesn't really bounce around. But when you're in a cave, that's all stone. It's going to bounce like crazy. That's how you get the echo in a cave, also in the bathroom too. Modulation is kind of fun. You can play with phaser and flagger and chorus. Phaser sounds futuristic. And it is. So there's a cartoon effect over my voice.
Was from a painting hung in the living room. There was a rice field, a straw hut, and water buffalo. So what does Laos have to do with me being Canadian? Since I was living in Canada and spoke English.
Cup of water is kind of interesting.
Canadian, right?
So again, there's a lot you can do in Adobe Audition. Bring those files in, and the basics are, I think, pretty straightforward. The options you have for saving these out is under Export, Export File. And the two file formats that we will do most of our work in and animate are either WAV format, which is uncompressed. It's going to be a big file, about 10 times the size. Or if you want, the other option is the MP3, which is going to be a lot smaller, maybe 3 to 4 megs for about 5 minutes of audio. And it'll tell you down here too. In terms of the sample rate, this is pretty fine in terms of MP3, 192. You don't have to change anything. And for the sample type, 14.1 16-bit is also pretty clear. If you start to play with these and you reduce the numbers, then you'll start to hear lower quality. It'll sound like it's you're talking through a telephone, where someone is really far away. It's not going to sound very clear, so I wouldn't play with these numbers too much. All right, so now we're in Animate, and to bring these in, it's very similar. It's going to be an asset in the layer. So layer 1, for example, I'm going to just hit F5 over here, and I'm going to just bring in the sound effect. In this case, it's the soundtrack. It's going to import that in. And if I just click over the first keyframe, go to Properties, you'll see that there's sound. And since I just dragged it in, it's going to be right there. So there's a little idea. And you have options here too. You can repeat the soundtrack. You can also apply an effect. So a fade-in is already here too. And if we just go ahead and hit Enter, so if we just go ahead and hit Enter, we hear the fade-in coming in. But then it'll stop. So make sure you do have the layer that has the audio. If it's going to be a soundtrack, to have it extend over time. Otherwise, it'll just stop. In this case too, I have an extra blank keyframe. Just go ahead and delete that, clear that keyframe, so that way I have my soundtrack layer. So you will probably have a sound effects layer, etc., in terms of putting your audio together. And you should always test it. The test movie up here in the top corner is going to be a little more accurate because the playback, if you just hit Enter with the preview, is going to give you the best quality for your CPU. So if your CPU is kind of slower, then it may have some lag in terms of the audio. So make sure you hit the play on the top there instead. One last extra thing I forgot to mention was that you can also change the pitch. So there's stretch and pitch as a process. One last thing I forgot to mention is we can also change the pitch of our voices. So if you go under Effects, there is Time and Pitch. So here's the pitch shifter, and we can go under the presets. Sound like a dark lord. Kind of dark. But you can change the semitones.
Personally, I was born in Canada, and growing up, Laos was never mentioned. The only image I had of Laos in my mind.
So you can see there are the semitones.
There was a rice field, a straw hut, and water buffalo.
So there you go. That's how we can play with different voices, as well with all the different editing. That's all I wanted to cover. Sound can be a lot of fun. It can take a lot of time in terms of how you design the soundscape, whether it's a fun piece or whether it's a serious piece. Sound plays a huge role in all of that. So that's all I got. Keep learning. Fresh Pete out.